listeners. I'm Victor Yang, and if you joined us last session, we hope that you're now excited about finding a congressional internship and fired up to really serve your community and get a closer look to the legislative process. So now the big question is, how do you actually get a congressional internship? So I've been a previous intern coordinator and was a previous congressional intern myself. And this was something that I was really curious about. How can I find an opportunity to work for Congress? Well, I'm excited that we're going to talk about that in today's panel. So I'm pleased to be joined by some true experts on this topic. Please give me a big welcome to intern coordinators from on and off the Hill in personal offices and committees, and most importantly, on both sides of the aisle. So with my wonderful candidates, I just wanted to let you all introduce yourself and explain kind of what your role is and how you got involved with interns.
My name's Haley Wint. I'm the Chief Clerk and Communications Aide for the House Committee on Veterans Affairs. I also assist with the intern program. I help hire interns, manage our program, and create professional development opportunities for them. I initially got involved because I was hired as a staff assistant, and our staff assistant manages our intern program. So the program was kind of handed to me by the former staff assistant, and I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you, Haley. And Ananda.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Excited to be here. My name is Ananda, and I am currently a legislative assistant with the Select Committee on Modernization. Before that, I worked for Congressman Seth Moulton for 2 years as an intern coordinator. Loved doing that. And I'm really excited that now with the Select Committee, I'm able to work on a variety of issues, including intern recruitment and issues that affect interns on Capitol Hill.
Thank you, Ananda. We're really excited for your expertise. Moving next to Katie.
Hi, everyone. My name is Katie Wallach. I was recently promoted to legislative correspondent and interim scheduler for Congressman Ronny Jackson of TX 13. I was previously the intern coordinator, and when I say previous, I mean 2 weeks ago. So I've just now handed the reins off to our new staff assistant. But before that, I did 7 months as intern coordinator, and I've actually been a former intern myself in Congressman Sessions' office. So I'm really excited you guys are all here.
Excited to have a Texan on our panel. It's such a big and wonderful state. Anika, you're last but not least.
Thank you, Victor. Hi, everyone. My name is Anika Aftab, and I work for the Partnership for Public Service, which is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization focused on building a better government. So I specifically work for the Alliance for Congress, and a few of my responsibilities include intern work, both internally and externally, ally engagement, and a few other things. So how I got involved with interns, just interns are integral to the process on both sides. So you can't have efficiency without them.
So I'll go back to you, Anika. How do we get started? How do you even just get a resume and cover letter drafted for an internship? You have a lot of experience seeing a lot of different resumes and cover letters. So what are some of the tips and tricks that you would like to give to some of our viewers?
Yeah, so I'm gonna sum it up in 2 points. So first, my first tip is, if you have relevant work experience, don't overcomplicate the text. So often we'll add fluff to make ourselves sound more qualified, but think of it this way: recruiters or those who are reviewing your resume, they have such limited time because they're going through sometimes hundreds, thousands of resumes all in one sitting. So I would recommend using verbs like facilitated, organized, cultivated, served, and then adding numbers or figures or any kind of stat that shows the impact that you've made. So for example, I wrote 15 blog posts related to Congress over a span of 3 weeks and reached an audience of over 500 plus people. So very simple. They know exactly what you did, for how long, and how many people it reached. One of my favorite quotes is saying, if they're looking for a gray sweater, don't say that you have a charcoal cardigan. Say that you have a gray sweater. And I think that it kind of encompasses what I'm trying to say about being direct. So the second tip that I have is add experience that you might not think is relevant, but often is. So something just a bit about me before my current position. I actually have 0 Capitol Hill experience, but I highlighted specific skills that I learned in my previous positions and reframed it in a way that made it seem like I would be successful in what I do now. So for example, if you worked in retail, in the food industry, customer service, you can write about working in a fast-paced work environment, having responsibilities, opening and closing, training other employees. So what I really encourage you to do is to be creative. So think about the clubs that you're in, Greek life, Habitat for Humanity, even faith-based organizations, things I've read where I went as a delegate and had a cross-cultural experience in X country, engaged with X number of people, peers and staff, worked with community members to build X, Y, and Z. So just really my final note is take that experience and transfer it to the position that you're applying for. So I'll pass it back to you, Victor.
Thank you, Anika. And I really loved what you said about really going direct and to the point. You know, a lot of times people get so many intern applications on Capitol Hill. You really want to make sure that your points are clear and concise, that they're not kind of ambiguous, because then folks look at that resume and they go, well, you know, I'm not really sure what they're trying to say through this point. On to the next one. And you want to make yourself very competitive in that manner. Ananda, I'll go to you next. So you work right now in the Modernization Committee, Subcommittee on Modernization. And a lot of folks on the call are still trying to figure out how Congress works. And one of the differences is that internships in a committee office are different from internships in a personal office. And on this panel, we have staffers on both committee and personal offices. So my question to you is, what would you say is kind of the biggest difference for interns working on a committee? And how does that really impact the application process?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'd say, I mean, the biggest difference in your day-to-day job as an intern in a personal office versus a committee is whether or not you're dealing with constituents, because obviously in a personal office, a huge part of your everyday is answering the phones and responding to messages from constituents, and you just have an overwhelming amount of mail that you're dealing with. So when you're applying, that's the main thing that I like to encourage people to highlight that they might not think is the most relevant. Like, instead of talking about you know, your research experience on a certain topic, it's even more important to talk about the customer service job that you might have had, because that's more closely aligned with the skills that you need to answer the phones or to respond to constituent emails. When you're going to a committee, I mean, I think the biggest difference is just making sure that when you're writing your application and when you're, you know, crafting your cover letter and resume, that you're emphasizing that you understand that those responsibilities are a little different. So I think the first thing I look for when I'm going through applications is just whether that cover letter is tailored and whether I can tell that you sent that same exact cover letter to 50 offices and you don't really care about what my committee is doing. So the first thing I look for is just, do you know the basics about the work of that our committee does? And that you're very clearly talking about that. And then after that, you know, the skills, I'd say you might focus a little more on your writing experience, you know, memos over your customer service, for example, or research might be a little more important if that's clearly outlined in the application. But I love that cashmere sweater example. I just read the job description, because every committee is very different too, and highlight back the bullet points that they're looking for, highlight those things that you already have.
Thank you so much for sharing. And I think that's a great point. You don't want to write an internship application with a cover letter that talks about the great work that you've done on tours and flags and send that to a committee office. You want to focus a little bit more on the research. But if you're applying to a personal office, you might want to cater that cover letter and resume a little bit differently, which is why, Katie, I was going to ask you, based on your experiences previously as an intern coordinator in a personal office, what really makes interns or intern applicants stand out when they apply for a internship in your office?
So I'm kind of going to steal a little bit of Ananda's answer, and customer experience is something that I really value in interns, especially for our office. Congressman Jackson is very active. He's in media, he's in social media, so he's everywhere. And people, not just our constituents, have a whole lot of opinions. So I want to make sure that whoever we let into our office is not only able to, do good work, but answering phones and really dealing with that the personalization that every constituent and every person who calls deserves. So on a resume, I want to see that attention to detail. If your resume does not look like a congressional resume or a professional resume should, that is a red flag for me. So I want to be able to see how your work has built you as a person. And I want to see how it will translate not only to yourself as a person, but how you will work in a team environment. So again, that customer service experience, I want to see you doing well in school. So any relevant memberships that you're a part of, any leadership, that's really important to me. And then also seeing consistent work, not just, oh, I worked or I volunteered. Volunteer is also really important. That is I'll call it a golden flag, if you will, because showing that you not only care about yourself and how you're doing, but your community as well. So really seeing that growth. So not seeing a couple year gaps in your resume unless you have an explanation for it. So those are the kinds of things that we look for, and we take references very seriously as well. So if you send in a reference, do it with a purpose. Don't just do it with someone that you met one time for one event. Make sure they have a relationship with you. So if I call, they can actually say some not only wonderful, but true things about you.
So for a committee office, focus a little bit more on playing up your research capabilities and your knowledge on a specific issue that committee is covering. But for the personal office, focus a little bit more on the customer service, answering the phones, maybe greeting people when they come in. I think that's really good perspective. And I thank you both, Ananda and Katie, for sharing it. And I do want to remind also our audience members that we do have a Q&A session. So during our discussion, if you have some questions that now you are starting to think about, hey, I might want to ask this or that to the panel, please feel free to drop it in that Q&A portion of the Zoom. So we've covered a lot so far, but now we want to get a little bit more into the details of how to really create a congressional cover letter and resume. And so I really want to go to Haley, who's also a tremendous Capitol Hill staffer, to talk a little bit about how do you structure, a congressional cover letter and resume?
Yeah, so in the pre-event materials, I included a model cover letter and a model, two model resumes from former interns on the Committee on Veterans Affairs. And so feel free after the session to take a look at how those are structured. But as Ananda and Katie mentioned, in the cover letter, at the very top, the first paragraph, we really look for applicants who are genuinely interested in working for our office, and they provide a reason or two as to why they're interested. So if you're interested in working for a committee, perhaps referencing the committee's issue area, any past work that you've done that's related to that issue area, or the work that the chair of the committee has done, and why you're passionate about that. If you're applying to work for a personal office, mentioning the background of the member, their legislative accomplishments, and how that's motivated you to apply for the internship, that's really helpful as well. In terms of resumes, we've talked a little bit about customer service experience, which is really important. And I wanted to mention that even if you don't have former Hill experience or campaign experience, just keep in mind that is not going to limit you, but you do need to show how your previous experience ties into the work that you'd be doing as an intern. So one example that I have is going into my very first internship. I was a press intern for Senator Tim Kaine. I had never interned for the government or interned on the Hill. And so I, at that time, worked as a supervisor at a call center at the Georgetown Alumni House, which essentially meant I cold called alumni and asked them to donate money to the school. And so during my interview and during the application process, I really had to go the extra mile to show how that type of environment, in which it's very fast paced and a very stressful environment, how that enabled me to be a great candidate, and how, speaking with disgruntled alumni, how that prepared me to interact with constituents and provide the best customer service experience. So as all of our panels have mentioned before, really focus on tying your previous experience to the current internship. Look at the key responsibilities and do that to advocate the best you can for yourself.
I want to jump to something a little bit more fun, and hopefully it's a question also that gives the audience a little perspective on, what really makes an intern candidate stand out. And so this is a question that I'll pose to all of you. What is the intern candidate that really stood out for you, and why did you choose them to be an intern? So I'll give you all a little bit of time to think of that. And I pose that question because for those of you in the audience, you want to be kind of creative, especially when you're applying for these internships. You want to make sure that not only is your cover letter and resume tailored specifically to that role, but you also want to make sure that, okay, like when I go through the internship process, what are some things that I can say to really stand out? Or, what are some kind of little golden nuggets that I can put into, my application that really makes me, attractive to that potential committee or personal office or even leadership office that you apply for. Because the speaker, majority leader, minority leader, they have interns as well. So I'll start with you, Katie. What intern candidate really stood out, and why did you pick them to be an intern?
So one of the candidates that sticks out in my mind, he was a phenomenal candidate. I think most of our staff was getting ready to cry when he left at the end of the semester. So for our office, something that we really harp on, not just a resume and cover letter, those are absolute vital parts of your application. Please spend a lot of time on them. And I'm going to kind of reiterate what everyone else said, those attention to detail. I'll give a bad example first. I had one application that I looked at online. They had come in and they'd spelt my boss's name wrong. They did not get an interview, to say the least. It's little, and this could have been fixed with a simple Google. So little things that made that personal investment. So bad example aside, let's go to the good example. He had contacted our office. So following up, being consistent. He says, he calls me because I have my name and number and email on our website for questions for coordinators, called and said, I would really love an application. I just sent my application. If there's anything else you need from me, please let me know. As soon as I got off the phone with him, he sent me another follow-up email. And then he sent one about a week later, just so showing that consistency that you really want this internship, that drive. So I finally gave him an interview. I caved. And he was prepared. I asked him about legislative priorities for the congressman, things that he had already passed and that was working on, and he actually gave me some examples. I asked him about some of his policies, and he knew about them. So that really stuck out to me during an interview, was how thoughtful and how considerate. Excuse me, my congressman just walked in. I thought he left already. And really,
bring him into the call.
and really just, again, those personal details and being able to have hold a conversation on the phone. Because I've had some interviews where the person I was interviewing was not able to hold a conversation. And that was something that was really worrisome for me. They had the best GPA, the best credentials, but if you can't talk to people and you can't communicate your ideas effectively, this is not the place for you.
And I think that's a really good point, Katie, that you made. Communication is really important for really any situation you're in, but definitely for a congressional internship. And making sure that you communicate effectively and clearly is very, very important. And I also like what you said about follow-ups. Follow-ups are really important because that keeps the person who's hiring, it keeps them remembering you, right? You're more fresh in their mind. You get that thank you email when you're considering someone and you go, oh yeah, I remember that person. I remember what we talked about during the interview, and you definitely consider them a little bit more. Ananda, I guess you're kind of next. I'm always thinking personal office and then committee office. But for you, what's an intern candidate that really stood out? Why'd you pick them?
Yeah, I'll give two but short examples. One person, I just never had anyone do this before. Came by and dropped off their resume and application in person and stopped at the front desk, met everyone, was like, really interested in working for your boss. Here's my materials. And I was just very impressed with that initiative, and I've never had anyone do that. So that got him an interview, and he was ended up being phenomenal. And then the other one I'll give, I'd say, there's some things that I consistently look for in applicants, but that's really hard to narrow people down because often you've got tons of people who have, meet all of your qualifications, and then you still have to narrow it down further. So things that stand out, I love this question. We had one intern who had a tech and computer science background, who talked about in his interview how he is really interested in solving administrative efficiencies and making systems work better. And he's like, I know how to code. I know you do lots of spreadsheet kinds of things. Like, I am an Excel wizard. I can automate all your systems for you. I can help with your tracking of tours. I can come up with new ways of doing things. And yeah, we brought him on and he was amazing. He automated our press clip systems. Like, a lot of these things that we were doing manually, he was able to do automatically for us. So again, not like a traditional thing that I look for in an intern, certainly not a necessary qualification, but just finding ways that your unique experience can help you stand out, I think is helpful in your application for sure.
Haley, moving on to you, what do you think is something that really stood out for an intern candidate that you applied, and why did you pick them as an intern?
Yeah, I mean, I remember seeing the application of someone who had done a lot of diversity and equity work on their campus. And that's something that I want to bring up because I don't want anyone watching this again to think that they need previous government experience to work on the Hill. I think having advocacy experience, nonprofit experience, if you're part of a cultural group at your school, or if you've tried to advocate for accessibility within your community, I think doing that type of DEIA work is very important and very important to bring with you to the Hill. So I think their application really stood out to me. Another quick example I can think of is someone who was applying for a press internship, had a semi-viral TikTok account. And to me, that signaled that they are very creative. They know how to speak to Gen Z, how to create content that resonates with that audience. And it was very cool to see. So for any social media influencers on this call who are also interested in interning on the Hill, that's kind of one way to market your skills.
I absolutely agree. I think, if you're able to use social media or communications, it's much easier for you to get an internship. I remember there was one intern actually, sorry to cut you off, Anika, because I know you got to go too. But they had really used social media to prop themselves up. I think that they were like talking about sports or something. And instantly when we looked at them, we're like, well, this is so cool. He's like doing like, I think it's like before TikTok, so he's like doing short YouTube videos on like sports clips. And we're like, this person just has kind of this entrepreneur kind of ability, this go-getter ability. And that's what we want in interns. So we reached out, but sadly someone else had already taken them. So, they beat us to a punch. But if you're able to leverage social media or, some kind of platform to really show yourself and your skills, then that's really going to help you in your internship application. So, and last but not least, again, Anika, sorry, I keep on putting you last. I don't know why.
No worries. I think everyone covered a lot of the points that I was going to make. I think for me personally, just one more thing I would add is I think the candidate, sorry, Alexa. I would say that I really find that individuals that can highlight their strengths and then mesh them with their passions really stand out to me. So what I encourage everyone really to do is just list out everything you're good at and then everything you care about. Oh, and then put, when you craft your resume and your cover letter, try to pull from those points as well as like looking at the job description and whatnot. And utilize Google, Google the company, or member of Congress. We've had individuals spell our partnership name wrong. Like those are like little things, like echoing what Katie said and echoing what Ananda said about that too. Just pay attention to details. And yeah, that's all I would add.
Well said. So we do have 5 minutes left. I don't see any questions in the chat. So I'm just going to speed round it through you all since there's 4 of you. 1 minute for each. What is just one thing you want to tell the audience about trying to get a congressional internship and acing that internship application?
I feel like I need to repeat my quote about the gray sweater. If they are looking for a gray sweater, don't say you have a charcoal cardigan. Say you have a gray sweater. Be direct. And just really show yourself, show the things that you bring to the table. So those are the 2 things I'd say.
Definitely Yeah, no, make sure to not have spelling, grammar mistakes, write a full 1-page cover letter, not longer, not shorter, have a header, just like basic, make it look nice kind of things are number one. And then it really is helpful if you've got, are able to start making connections and have someone flag your application for you. I agree that definitely don't list someone as a reference who doesn't actually know you, but if you get a coffee with someone and they can flag your application, just say, hey, I talked to this person once, they seemed cool. It is an unfortunate reality that is helpful just because there's so many applications that come into an office, so that can help you stand out. So as much as you can talk to people, I'm always open to talking. I know these other panelists are too.
I would say practice interviewing. So do some research on the committee or the office ahead of time and just take a half hour. And, there are so many websites online that have practice interview questions. Just practice going through them, creating concise responses. And when I say concise, less than 4 minutes, less than 3 minutes, try not to speak for 10 minutes on one question, because that has happened to me before, but create concise responses, cite previous examples of work that you've done, and just, convey your genuine interest in the opportunity during the interview.
Katie, in our new location now?
Yes, I'm in the hallway, so this works. No, so proofread. Give your resume and cover letter to family, give it to friends. If you have any one who reads resumes for a living, let them see it. If they cannot understand it, especially if they're not in your line of work, if they don't have any experience that you've had before, if they don't understand it, chances are we're not going to understand it either. So make sure you're very clear in what your intentions are, very explanatory. And then in your cover letter, you can explain things that aren't necessarily in your resume. People forget that you're not bound to your resume, what you can discuss in your cover letter. That's really your chance to shine. Talk about an issue area that you really like. Make sure you call and figure out who to write the cover letter to. Dear whom it may concern is fine, but if you can address it, dear Anika, dear Haley, this is a little bit extra.
Absolutely. Great words of advice. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. Virtual applause for you all. Again, my name is Victor. Thank you so much for joining. And thank you also for sharing my YouTube channel. I do have a YouTube channel that talks a little bit about these tips. So if you guys want more information, feel free to go there as well. Thank you for watching.